Hello dear students, in this session let us continue with some of the basic concepts of cryptography. Okay, so in the previous session we have discussed the definition of cryptography and some of the substitution techniques. I have just mentioned some of the names like Caesar cipher, shift cipher, affine cipher, Hill cipher. These are some of the techniques which we use to encrypt and decrypt the data. So we have seen the basic definition for key, secret key, plain text, ciphertext, encryption, decryption, everything, right? And also we have seen some of the objectives of our cryptography. So in this session let us continue with the difference between modern cryptography and the classical cryptography and attacks which are there in cryptography. We will discuss all these topics. Okay, so before that, the question arises, is the cryptography is new to modern days, or whether is it there even before, that means even in the ancient times? Yes, in ancient times, in order to convey the messages from one kingdom to another kingdom, they were using this technique, but there they have used the name called hieroglyph. Okay, hieroglyph is nothing but it was a character of the ancient Egyptians, or you can say that hieroglyph is nothing but a writing scheme or writing system, but it is not in the alphabet format, it is in the form of pictorial representation. You can observe this image. This is nothing but hieroglyph or hieroglyph. This is nothing but a character of the ancient Egypt. This is how they were conveying the messages, that is secret messages, from one kingdom to another kingdom. Okay, this pictorial representation or this code was kept very secret, and it is known only to scribes. Scribes are nothing but those who transmit the messages. Okay, on behalf of the king. Later what happened is the scholar moved on to using the simple mono-alphabetic substitution ciphers. Mono-alphabetic substitution ciphers. In mono-alphabetic substitution ciphers, it is involved in replacing the alphabets of the messages with the other alphabet using the secret key. I have given an example in the previous session. So, in order to retrieve the original message or the plain text, we must know the secret key. And later on what happened is they have assigned a number or Roman number to each of the alphabet, which is known as Caesar shift ciphers. So here releases on shifting the letters of a message to agreed numbers. Okay, that means if the original letter is, I have an original letter, say crypto. The original message will be crypto. We are dividing this word into number of letters C R Y P T O. Now I have to encrypt this message. Okay, so using the key, secret key, I will encrypt this message as E T A R V, Q. So replacing C by E, R by T, Y by A, P by R, T by V and O by Q. Since it is very simple, you can observe that there is a one shift, that is there is a two shift here. That means C is replaced by E, means in between we have D, right? So C shifted to D, then D shifted to E. So we are replacing C by E. Here R is replaced by T, Y replaced by A, P replaced by R, T replaced by V and O replaced by Q. So if the word is very simple, then you can say that the value of K is 2 here. So this is how the cryptography was started in the ancient times. Okay. Later on, with the advances taking place in the field of cryptography, in military systems, government organizers, and some corporate house started adopting the cryptography systems or applications on cryptography. Okay, they started using cryptography in order to guard their secrets from others. So this is how the arrival of modern cryptography takes place. So there are some difference between classical cryptography as well as modern cryptography. So major thing in cryptography is the whole subject of cryptography deals with various concepts of your mathematics such as number theory, probability theory and so on. These two are the major ones. Okay. Now let us observe some of the difference between classical cryptography and modern cryptography. Okay. In classical cryptography, it manipulates traditional characters. Traditional characters are nothing but letters and digits. So here in classical cryptography, we directly manipulate the letters and the digits. That is, as we have seen in the previous session, for each and every letters the number is assigned, right? Using that concept, that is comes under your classical cryptography. So when it comes to modern cryptography, it operates on binary bit sequence. Binary bit sequence or nothing but it just deals with zeros and ones. Okay, so the hacking of information in modern cryptography is little more difficulty. The second difference is the technique that employed for coding in your classical cryptography to keep the secrets. So what happens in classical cryptography is for sender and receiver, the secret key and the information will be known to sender and receiver only when it comes to classical cryptography. But in modern cryptography, the algorithms will be known publicly. For example, in the previous session, we have discussed some of the substitution techniques, right? In those substitution techniques, if you just Google the cipher name, you will get the algorithms very easily. But the difficulty is you will not know the key, that is secret key. So if you know the secret key, then only you can encrypt or decrypt the text or the data, or else you cannot know. Even knowing the algorithm, even knowing the computational difficulty in the algorithm, the absence of secret key makes it impossible from an attacker to obtain the original information. Okay, But here what will happen? The techniques that employed for coding were kept secret, and only the parties involved in the communication, that is sender and receiver, only to sender and receiver the secret will be known. This is one of the difference between your modern cryptography and classical cryptography. One more difference is, in your classical cryptography it requires the entire crypto system for communicating confidentially. So in order to communicate the confidential things, you should know the entire crypto system. But when it comes to modern cryptography, it requires parties interested in secure communication to possess the secret key only. That means if you have some 10 words, in that 10 words, if you want to maintain secret with only 2 words, you can do for only 2 words itself. You need not to use the complete sentence. That is for modern cryptography. These three are some of the important difference between your classical cryptography as well as modern cryptography. Now, by observing all these things, we can say that the primary goal of cryptography is to keep the plain text secret, right? That is the original text secret. That means we have to maintain the secrecy from the eavesdroppers. What do you mean by eavesdroppers? Eavesdroppers are nothing but secretly listening or listen to a conversation. The one who listens the conversation very secretly, they are called as eavesdroppers. This is a technical word, okay? So we need to maintain the secrecy in the information from the eavesdroppers, trying to get some information about the plain text. This is the main primary goal of our cryptography, okay? So we have two attacks. One is passive attack. Another one is active attack in our cryptography. Okay. In modern cryptography, we have a very basic principle. Okay. That principle is called as Kirchhoff's principle. The statement of Kirchhoff's principle says that a crypto system should be secured even if everything about the system except the key is public knowledge. This is the statement of the Kirchhoff's principle. That means why it is related to modern cryptography, because in the difference we have seen that in modern cryptography the algorithm will be known publicly, right? So you can see this statement, even everything about the system except the key is public knowledge. That means even if the algorithm is public, is known to all, if you maintain the secrecy with your key, then you cannot get the information which is kept secret. That means the secured information will not be leaked even if everything about the system is public knowledge except the key. This principle is called as Kirchhoff's principle. Now let's concentrate on next topic, that is attacks on the secrecy of an encryption scheme. Okay, so there are, as I said, there are two types of attacks. One is active attack and another one is passive attack. First, let's study the passive attacks. In passive attacks, the main goal of this attack is to obtain unauthorized access to the information. Unauthorized access to the information. For example, I can say that intercepting and eavesdropping on the communication channel can be regarded as a passive attack. That means if this is a channel, say host A, and this is a channel 2, that is host B, continuously there is a transfer of information between host A and host B. If the attackers hacks the information, here the attacker will be, so the communication is going on between host A and host B. Here there is an attacker. This is called as passive eavesdropper. That means secretly this attacker is listening to the information which is taking place between host A and host B. So the main goal of a passive attacker is to obtain unauthorized access to the information. This type of attacks will come under passive attack. In passive attack we have two types. One is the release of message content, and the another one is traffic analysis. So let's see what is this release of message content. Pictorially, I can explain release of message content as, for example, here there is a person called Lily. The receiver one is John. There is a communication is taking place between Lily and John through internet. We have a third person, he is an attacker called Bob. What he will do is, he will just read the content of message which Lily is sending to John. I repeat, passive attack. In passive attack we have two main attacks. One is release of message content, another one is traffic analysis. The main goal of passive attack is to obtain unauthorized access to the information. As I mentioned, the example will be eavesdropper, right? So in release of message content, what happens is, there is a person, say Lily, he is sending a message to John using internet. Okay, using, for example, we can say that some social media. So the account of Lily's gets hacked and the hacker is Bob here. What he is doing is, he is just reading all the contents of the messages which is sending by Lily to John. So I can represent this as, Bob reads the content of message which Lily sends to John. So the release of message content is nothing but, you can say that telephonic conversation or email or transferring files. These all may contain some sensitive or confidential information, right? So we would like to prevent an opponent opponent here is Bob, from learning the contents of this transmission. So this is what release of message content. The next one is traffic analysis. Pictorially I can represent traffic analysis as, so again we have a sender, say Lily, he is sending to John some secret or confidential matters. Okay, so here again the attacker, say Bob, what he is doing is he is just observing all the patterns of the messages exchanging between these two persons. He is not learning, he is just observing the pattern. I can represent that as Bob observes the pattern of messages exchanging between Lily and John. Suppose that if we had a way of encrypting information so that attacker, even if captured the messages, could not extract the information from the message. Okay, if that is the situation, the opponent could determine the location, identity of communicating host, and he can observe the frequency and length of the message that is exchanging between Lily and John. So what is this opponent is doing? He is determining the location and identity of communicating host, and he could observe the frequency and length of messages which is being exchanged between Lily and John. This information might be useful in guessing the nature of the communication that is taking place between Lily and John. This is nothing but traffic analysis. So the difference between release of message content and traffic analysis are, here the attacker reads the content of messages which is exchanging between Lily and John, but in traffic analysis he is observing the pattern of messages which is exchanging between Lily and John. So these two are different types of attacks in passive attack. Now let's move to active attacks. In active attack, here an attacker attempts to alter the system, alter system resources, or he may affect the operations. That means what active attacks does is, active attacks involves some modification of the data or creating false statements. These type of attacks come under active attacks. Okay, so what will the attacker does? He just modify the data or he may create some false statements. That means he is altering the system resource itself. Okay, here we have four types of attacks. Mainly we will study the four types of attacks. The first one is masquerade. Masquerade as or nothing but, first I will explain this also using pictorial representation. Let us consider we have a sender and his name is Bob. At the receiving end we have Alice. The conversation is taking place between these two people using some internet. Okay, so the third person, his name is Darth. What he is doing is, he is pretending that as Alice. So Darth pretends to be Alice. That means he's hacking or he's altering the system resource of Alice, and whatever the messages is coming from Bob, Darth is replying to that messages, but Bob is not aware of that. He thinks he's doing communication with Alice, but Darth pretends to be Alice. Okay, so masquerade attack takes place when one entity, here one entity means Darth, he is pretending to be the different entity. The different entity here is Alice. So a masquerade attack involves one of the other form of active attacks. So you just should remember is one entity pretends to be the other entity in masquerade. The second one is modification of messages. In modification of messages, if a Bob sends a message to John, here the attacker we have is Darth. This Darth modifies the message and send to John. For example, if Bob sends a message as good morning, what will this attacker does is he will just modify this message as good night and he will send that to John. But according to John, Bob is sending that message to John. But what happens? This Darth is modifying the messages. It means that some portion of a message is altered, or that message is delayed or reordered to produce an unauthorized effect. Okay, so even in confidential file, if John wants to send a confidential file X, what will this attacker does? He will modify this X, okay, to some other letter or some other file name. If a Bob says allow John to read confidential file X, what will this Darth does? He will does that allow Smith to read the confidential file X. He may send the message in that way. He may modify the message in that way. That is what the modification of messages means. Okay. The third one is repudiation. In the previous session in objectives we have seen non-repudiation, right? So repudiation means this attack is done by either sender or receiver. It's like the sender or receiver can deny the later that he or she send or receive a message. That means, for example, if a customer asks his bank to transfer an amount to someone, so what is going on? Some customer say X, okay, he is asking his bank to transfer some amount to some people, and later on this customer can deny that he had made such a request. This is called as repudiation. Okay, so this is one type of attack in your active attacks. The last one is a replay. Here if Bob, again the same communication is going on between Bob and Alice. So what happens in this attack is this Darth captures the message and resend it to Bob itself. Okay, it involves the passive capture of a message and its subsequent the transmission. Sometimes what happens is this attacker captures the message and he used to send the same message repeatedly. Some 3-4 times repeatedly you will be getting the messages. That is nothing but replay. So we have seen different types of attacks. One is passive attack, another one is active attack. In that, again, for passive attack we have seen two types of attacks. One is release of message content, another one is traffic analysis. In active attack we have seen four important attacks. One is masquerade, second one is modification of messages, third one is repudiation, and the fourth one is a replay. Okay, so in the next session I will continue with some more topics of your cryptography. Thank you.